if I did not follow the structure or syntax of the program, then what's going to happen? There is maybe a error. If an error occur, what's going to happen? It changes the flow of execution. The try block in C# is used to place the code that may throw an exception. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on managing errors and exception. I am Revati from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, in my today's session, I am going to deal with what is error and how to handle error. Before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topic which I have discussed in my previous session. So dear student, in my previous session, I started with how to format output in C# programming. Along with that, I have discussed what is standard numeric format and how to perform standard numeric format, along with what are the characters I can able to use while performing standard numeric format. Along with that, I have discussed how to custom numeric format string, that is nothing but #0 dot then comma etc. These are the certain symbols used to perform custom numeric format string. So dear student, these are the very important topic from the examination point of view, because you can expect any short question under standard numeric format, or you can expect one short question under custom numeric format. Now, in my today's session, I'm going to discuss what is an error. Along with that, I'm going to discuss the different types of errors as well as how to handle exception, what are the exception class I have. Along with that, I'm going to discuss what is try and what is catch block and how to handle exception and what are the exception handlers I'm going to have. Along with that, some example programs. Now, what is an error? So here errors are nothing but the bugs, and when I'm going to get the bugs, when I execute my program, that time I'm going to get the bugs. If errors happens, then what's going to happen? The flow of control is going to change and we are not going to get the exact and expected output, and there are certain time it's not possible to run the program. So what is an error here? That is nothing but the exception, or it's nothing but the bugs. And when it's going to happen? When we execute the program. And when it is going to generate, that means if I write improper program, or if I write improper syntax, or if I write improper logic, then I'm going to have an exception or an error. Now, in programming language, errors can be divided into 3 categories. So what is an error? We came to know. Now, what are the different types of errors we can have in our programming language? That is 3 types of errors. In that first one, syntax error. So dear student, what is syntax? So dear student, if I consider programming language, while writing programs, we have to follow the structure or syntax of that program. And while writing program, if I did not follow the structure or syntax of the program, then what's going to happen? There is maybe a error, and those kind of errors falls under syntax error. So syntax errors occurs during development. So during development in the sense what? During the coding or during the implementation, and when you make type mistake in codes. So when I typing the programs and if I make the mistake, those kinds of errors falls under syntax error. Now I have simple syntax error here. See, what is the data type? That is Boolean. Then flag is my variable and I'm going to set flag equal to true. And while flag, see, if I consider programming language, we have to follow this syntax, and if it is C program, then I can able to use small letter, and if I consider C# programming, then it is case sensitive, and here I am going to use capital letter while. See, all the letters are in my while keyword, it's in capital letter. Now syntax error because C# is case sensitive, and even while writing console, I want to use capital letter C. Instead of writing capital letter C, if I write small letter c, once again I'm going to get the errors, and these kinds of errors comes under syntax error. Now dear student, I'm going to have another kind of error, that is runtime error or runtime exception. So runtime errors occurs during execution of the program. So when it is going to occur during the execution of the program, in the sense we are going to write the program as well as logic, and we are not going to think and we are not going to bother about the logic, and during the execution of the program, if I get any fault in the program, then that is known as runtime error. So these are the exceptions. So these are the example for exception, and this can be caused due to improper use of input as well as improper design, logic or system error. So what is runtime error and what are the things I can able to consider under runtime error? That is improper input or logic error or even system error. Now if I consider this example, see here, I have the integer data type and variable a holds 5 and variable b holds 0, and when I try to divide 5 by 0, then what's going to happen? I'm going to get the error message. And what kind of error message? That is divided by 0, because I cannot able to divide 5 by 0 because it is 0, and I cannot able to divide 5 by 0. So it is divide by 0 exception. And exception can be handled by using try and catch block. That means in C# program, to handle the exception, we have certain methods. In that, first one is try and catch block. That means whatever the code I want to execute, that should be written inside the try block, and if that code generates any error, that can be handled and catched by the catch block. Anyway, we will study what is try block or what is catch block, how we are going to use all those things in my today's session itself. Now you just concentrate about what is runtime error or runtime exception. Now the another type of exception is logical error. So what is logical error? That is error in the program logic. So logical errors occur when the program is written fine. That means program is written fine. There is no error, nothing. But it does not produce desired result. So I'm not getting desired result. So logical errors are very difficult to find because we think that whatever the output we got, that is correct, because it does not generate any error. I'm going to get the output, but in that whatever the output I'm going to get, it is wrong. So dear student, let me to consider the example here. Think that I want to find the difference. Okay, what I want to do here, I want to find the difference. But by mistake, if I write A plus B, so it's going to return the sum. But what I want to get? I want to get the difference. And another example here, see here, A plus B divided by 2.0. So here A plus B, and see if I write A plus B within the bracket and if I divide, I'm going to get the proper result. But what I did here, A plus B. So here see A is 5 plus B is 6 divided by 2. So what answer I'm going to get? I'm going to get the answer, it is 8. But here what I want to do, I just want to add 5 plus 6. So it is 11. 11 divided by 2, what is the answer I want to get? That is 5.5. But here I'm getting 8. So this kind of errors falls under logical error. So mistake in our logic. Now, what is C hash exception and why I want C hash exception? So dear student, till now we were discussing about the type of an error, and to handle the errors properly in our programming language, we require some methods. For that, I'm going to have exception handling in C hash programming. So exception handling in C hash is a process of handle runtime error. So what is runtime error? Whatever the error we are going to get during the execution of the program, and to handle those kinds of errors, I'm going to have the exception handling method. And exception handling helps the normal flow of execution. So dear student, if an error occurs, what's going to happen? It changes the flow of execution. But now I want to have the normal flow of execution. For that, I'm going to use the exception handling terminology in my C hash programming. And if I use exception handling, it allows the user to maintain the normal flow of applications. In C hash, exception is an event or object which is thrown at the runtime. So dear student, if I consider C hash programming, it is example for object-oriented programming language. Now, suppose if I consider exception handling in C hash, then all the things are treated as objects or it is nothing but an event. All exceptions that derived from system.exception. That means whatever the runtime exception I'm going to get in my program, all the things are derived from the system dot exception. So what is system here? That is nothing but the namespace. And in this namespace, I'm going to have the exception class. So all exception that derived from system.exception class, and it is runtime error which can be handled. To handle all runtime errors, I'm going to have the exception handling methodology. And if we don't want to handle the exception, it prints exception message and terminates the program. So dear student, there are certain times I don't want to handle the exception. So in that time, what's going to happen? It's just going to print the error message and it's not going to handle the exception. Now, what is the advantage of exception handling in C hash? So dear student, if we handle the exception or errors properly, then we can able to control the normal flow of execution. So it maintains the normal flow of the execution. In such case, rest of the code is executed even after exception. So dear student, if I use exception handling methodology in my program, then I can able to follow the normal flow of the execution. Even though if the exception is generated, then it is handled properly so that we can able to continue the normal flow of the execution. And see here, I'm going to have the certain C hash exception classes. So here I have the exception system dot divide by 0 exception. So dear student, when I try to divide some number by 0, I'm going to get the error called it is not possible to divide the number by 0. So here what kind of exception? That is system dot divide by 0 exception. So here 10 divided by 0. And if I consider system dot null reference, there are certain time I just want to reference the object. Okay, there are certain time I just want to reference the object. And if I try to reference null object, then what's going to happen? It throws some error. To handle that error, I'm going to have system, it is my namespace. Under that, I'm going to have the null reference exception. So this is my class. Now here, see, system dot invalid cost exception. So here, there are certain time I'm going to perform typecasting. And in C hash, if I try to convert string to integer or integer to string, okay, there are certain time it generates typecasting exception. So handles the error generated by the invalid typecasting. So I just want to convert one type of data into another type of data. In that time, the system or program is going to generate some kind of errors. To handle those kind of errors, I'm going to have the exception class called invalid cost exception. Then I have system.io.io exception. So what is IO here? That is nothing but input and output operation. While handling or while performing input and output operation, if I get any error, to handle those error, I want some exception class. And C hash supports io.io exception. So this is the another type of exception used to handle input-output errors. Then system.field access exception. There are certain time I'm going to use the access specifier to protect the field. And if I used some access specifier, even though if I try to access that field, then it generates some kind of errors. For example, think that I have private data member as well as methods. Now, if I try to access private data members as well as methods out of the class, then what's going to happen? It generates some errors, and to handle those kinds of errors, I'm going to have field access exception. So these are the certain exception class supported by the C# programming language. Now, till now, we were discussing about what is exception, what are the different kinds of exception and how to handle the exception and what are the different classes of exception we have under C# programming. Now, to handle the exception properly, C# supports 4 different types of keywords, that is try, catch, finally and throw. So here C# supports 4 keywords to handle the exception properly in our C# programming. Now, in that, first keyword is try and catch block. So dear student, whenever I use try block, then that must be followed by the catch block. Then why I'm going to use try and catch block together? Because whatever the program I want to execute, that should be written inside the try block, and if this try block generates any error, that must be handled by the catch block. So here try must be followed by the catch block. So dear student, in C# programming, an exception handling is performed by try and catch statement. The try block in C# is used to place the code that may throw an exception. So dear student, why I'm going to have the try block and what I'm going to place in the try block, that is whatever the program I want to execute and that may generate or throw an error. Okay, those kinds of codes are written inside the try block. And a catch block is used to handle the exception. The catch block must be followed or preceded by the try block. So I'm going to have the try block first. After that, I'm going to have the catch block in my C# programming. So here, exception handler. So exception handling is a mechanism that is mainly used to detect and handle runtime error. So dear student, in programming language, while writing program, we may make mistake. To identify the mistake or errors, to handle the errors, I'm going to have certain technique, that is exception handling technique, and it is achieved by using try, catch, finally block. So what's the sequence of using try, catch, finally block? That is, at the beginning I have try, that is followed by catch, and that is followed by finally. So here try, after that I have catch, after that I have the finally. So here exception can be handled effectively by using try, catch and finally. Even I have throws. So dear student, along with try, catch, finally we have throw. So what is throw? Here throw is mainly used to handle user defined exception. So user can able to create their own exception and they can able to throw, and that can be handled effectively by using throw keyword. So dear student, let me to consider simple syntax here. Suppose if I want to use try block in my program, then I must precede with the keyword try. That means I want to use try, then whatever the statement I want to execute, and that is going to generate an error that must be written inside my try block. Now this try is followed by the catch block. Now why I want catch block? It's mainly used to handle the exception. Now this is the syntax I have. So catch, it's a keyword. Then I want to specify the exception type and object. So what is an exception in C# programming? That's nothing but the event or object. So here E is nothing but an object, and whatever the exception handling statement I have, that should be written inside this curly brace. Now I'm going to have the finally block. So dear student, there are certain time even catch block may miss to handle an exception. Now to missed exception must be handled properly by the finally block, and this finally block is going to execute, and it is responsible for performing all the cleanup procedure, as well as it is going to perform closing the connection. So dear student, think that I have connected database and I missed to close the database connection. And where I'm going to close the database connection? In my finally. So here the finally block can be used for doing any cleanup process like releasing unused resources, even if an exception is thrown. For example, disposing database connection and clean up unused resources, or releasing unused resources, even deallocating memory space. Okay, all those things are the responsibilities of finally block. So what is finally? It is also used to handle the errors, and it is responsible for performing cleanup as well as closing the connection. And what are the responsibility? It is mainly used to releasing unused resources, close the database connections, and deallocate the memory, etc. And I have the syntax here, that is finally, and whatever the cleanup process I want to perform, that should be written inside this curly brace. So statement of clean up. Now dear student, I'm going to have another keyword, that is throw. This keyword is used to throw an exception explicitly. So there are certain time user want to throw an exception explicitly, and that must be handled. For that, I'm going to have the keyword throw. So see here, I have the try. After that, I'm going to have the catch. Even in this catch, I can able to handle my own exception. For that, I'm going to have the keyword throw, and this is my object, and it is mainly used to handle an exception explicitly. So dear student, now I'm going to have some program, that is C# example program without using try and catch block. So this is the program. See here, I'm not going to use exception handling technique. So here, see, I have the class called example, that is EX example, and I'm going to have the main program. Here I'm going to have the number 10 and 0. Okay, when I divide 10 by 0, what's going to happen? It's going to throw, or it's going to generate some errors. And what kind of error? That is divide by 0. So here I'm trying to print rest of the code. See here, I'm going to divide the number and I'm going to try to display some output. And when I execute this program, what is the output I'm going to get? That is unhandled exception. See, here this code is going to generate some exception, but it's not handled properly and it's not yet handled. So what is the output I'm going to get? That is unhandled exception. That is system dot divide by 0 exception and attempted to divide by 0. That means trying to divide by 0. Now, the same program can be written in some other way by using try and catch block. See here, I have same program. So, EX example and I have the main method. Inside this, see here, whatever the program I want to execute, that should be written inside the try. See here, I know that this code is going to generate error. Okay. Now, I want to handle the error. So, what I'm going to do? I'm going to write this code within the try block. And here I have the catch block and I'm going to write exception E. And see, I'm going to handle the exception by using catch block. And I'm going to display the output, that is rest of the code. Now, when I compile this program and when I run this program, I'm going to get the output, that is system dot divide by 0 exception, because this error is handled by using try and catch block and attempted to divide by 0. So, we are attempting or we are trying to divide a number by 0 and I'm going to get the output rest of the code. Now, if I consider this example here, this program is going to generate an error and that can be handled properly and effectively by the try and catch block. So, this is the usage of try and catch block, and user can able to use try and catch block according to their need and according to their wish. So dear student, in my today's session I started with how to handle an error and what is an error, what are the different kinds of errors we are going to get under C# programming. Along with that, I have discussed what is an exception and what are the keywords used to handle an exception. That is nothing but try, catch, finally, as well as throw. Along with that, I have explained how to handle an errors with try and catch block. But in my next session, I'm going to deal with what is multiple catch block and how I can able to use multiple catch block in my program and what is C#. Finally, along with that, I'm going to deal with exception hierarchy. So these are the certain topic I'm going to deal in my next session. Anyway, dear student, let's meet in the next session with more information about an exception handling. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.